Awesome. All right, I'm gonna stop my video just so I can focus on these slides, and then we'll pop back up at the end. As Katie was saying, my name is Caitlin Quinn. I'm from an organization called HeARTs, and we're a national organization that really focuses on all things marketing related to shelter and rescue pets. So our goal is really to put resources and tools into the hands of anybody fostering, volunteering, working at shelters, just to make the act of promotion, the act of marketing, not just our animals, but also our services and the entire idea of pet adoption, just a little bit more easy. Few of us that end up in the role of marketers in, in animal welfare came by that on purpose. A lot of us do this by accident. A lot of us kind of fall into this as part of a job that has us wearing many hats. I think especially if you are a foster, you may have a totally different day job, right, than what your fostering duties kind of call you to do. So my hope is that we can kind of dive in and talk about how we can all make a difference, especially using social media for our foster pets and getting them home faster. So the first thing I'll just tell you is that HeARTs is celebrating its 10-year anniversary this year. So we started in 2010, and we started as a community of artists that were giving their time pro bono in animal shelters and rescues across the country. And we've since, developed a lot of shelter-facing programs. So we do, in a normal year, in a year that's not 2020, we do a number of workshops across the country that teach photography and marketing to shelters and rescues. So this is a really nice opportunity to kind of bring some of that digitally and still be able to reach and talk with some of you. And we also have a program called HeARTs EDU, which I definitely want you guys to check out when you're done with this presentation, because it has a lot of the creative tools that we'll talk about a little bit later on, in terms of some overlays, some free graphics, some tools for you to use to help promote your pets on social media. So the first thing I want to talk about, I think especially this conversation is timely right now, given if any of you have seen the Netflix documentary, The Social Dilemma. I think that it's a good question to ask why social media, and why is this an area of focus for us? And there's a couple of answers, and I think some of them are super obvious. So the price is right for all shelters and rescues, for all of us who are fostering. It's a free way to get our information out there. And despite the struggles that we may be having with social media right now, both just in terms of reach and any kind of moral dilemma with social media, it's still a way for us to reach people in our community that we may have never heard of pet adoption before, may not know about our organization or about fostering at all. So it's still a way for us to leverage that free pathway into our community. And it is, I think, important to remember that it is a community building tool. So we have to use social media. We have to take that social part of social media really seriously in terms of kind of the call and response aspect of it. So if we're just putting content out into the universe and not responding when people have questions, or giving quick pathways to finding out more, we have to think through that whole user experience, from someone viewing a cute photo of our foster pet all the way through to how do we get them to take action? If this is a potential adopter for this pet, how do we make sure that they have everything that they need to take those next steps? And also is a tool for slow and steady change. And I know that we're in some ways seeing the worst of social media in 2020, but there's still some really good parts about what we can do with this, with any of these platforms. And I want you to think about some of your posts, and we'll continually revisit this idea throughout this presentation, but I want you to think about your posts as not just doing good for that one individual animal that you're posting, or that one foster pet that you're trying to get adopted, but how those posts can also really lead someone to considering adopting a pet or interacting with the organization that you're working with in a way that maybe they never thought of before. So maybe they never thought about fostering before, but this is the way that you entice them to become a part of that foster community. Maybe they have traditionally gotten their pets through other means, right? There's a lot of ways that people in the community can acquire pets, from friends and family to neighbors to pet stores and everything in between. So if we want them to think about pet adoption differently than maybe their current way of thinking is, all of our posts can start to influence that behavior. And that's what I mean by slow and steady change, is we can actually create a change in attitudes, a change in practices through the way that we use social media. And I know that sounds lofty, but I promise it's a lot easier than it probably sounds right now. And again, it also taps into this idea of it takes a village. And for any of you who are with small organizations, small rescues, maybe entirely foster-based organizations, I think it's really important to realize that the way that we use social media allows it to be kind of a group effort, and that if we're all on the same page, we're all reading from the same book or the same script, then we can certainly kind of tackle that issue of this, rather than being one person's job, this kind of group effort of influencing behaviors and getting pets adopted. So we're going to cover a couple of different basics in this presentation, and I'm going to focus a lot on how we can create good content, and hope to, at the end of this presentation, have a little bit of time to talk about any specific questions on a per platform basis, because if we wanted to talk about social media platforms, we could do that for probably 6 hours. There's a lot to unpack. So I'm going to instead focus on the content that we can put out via pretty much any platform. So the keys to engagement are making our messages easy to act on. And what I mean by that is, again, giving people the tools that they need right off the bat. How can they see an adorable photo, connect with an animal over social media, and immediately take action? Realizing that digital marketing is fluid is so important at this moment in time. If you're managing social media for an entire organization or a page, or if you've created a page for your foster pets, rather than say an individual personal account, you're probably noticing that a lot of your engagement is tanking right now. That's certainly a universal kind of issue right now with a lot of not just shelters and rescues, but nonprofits in general. There's kind of this call out to other people for help right now that I'm seeing in a lot of the forums and a lot of the working groups that I'm in, because people are really struggling to reach people. It's important to realize that this is a moment in time when that's happening. And there are some things that we can do to adjust to whatever the latest and greatest algorithm changes are, so that we can get our posts seen a little bit more. And again, calling back to this idea of, let's talk about how we not just want to get eyes on an individual pet, but how we want people to view pet adoption in general, and our organization that we're representing in general. And towards the end of this presentation, I do want to unpack a little bit, understanding that different platforms have different rules of engagement. So what works on Facebook might not work on Instagram in the exact same way. And if you're doing things like posting automatic posts from Facebook to Twitter or Facebook to Instagram, realize that if that content's not built for those specific platforms, if you're not kind of intentionally creating a tweet or creating an Instagram post, just being on those platforms isn't as good as being fully engaged in those platforms. So I think this is an important conversation, and I am not sure kind of what our representation is in the group right now in terms of participants, whether or not you are a foster or you're someone working in fostering for an organization. So whether you're heading up the foster program at your shelter or rescue, or you're an active foster, I think this is important for all of us to recognize this kind of setting expectations and understanding expectations. So I think that what I tend to see a lot, especially in working with groups across the country, is sometimes this frustration between fosters putting out a lot of content on their personal accounts, and then the shelter or rescue not using it or not even knowing that it exists. So I think it's an important conversation, no matter which side of the table you're sitting at, is to say kind of, what is my role as a foster in marketing, and how can I more easily get this content to the shelter or rescue so that they're not hunting around for it, so that we're either using a central hashtag so that all of this stuff is discoverable, so that I'm dropping these photos and bits of bio writing that I'm doing into maybe a foster Facebook group or a Dropbox account or a Google account. I think, again, no matter what role you're in, having this conversation to say, how can I make this easier for you, and vice versa, so that ultimately the pets are winning? Because the easier that we can make content to grab for the people who maybe are heading up, the organization's social media account, the faster that they can promote those pets, and the faster a foster pet gets adopted, the faster you get to take a new one into your home, right? And be able to kind of complete that cycle and continue to save lives at a decent pace. I think one of the things that I want to recommend is, for right off the bat, knowing who to contact. So who is the foster manager, or who is the person managing communications for your organization? Who do you contact for adoption related questions? Are they the same person? Typically, they may not be. And then who are you contacting for also medical and behavioral support? Because I think the worst thing that can happen sometimes is that we find out that there's something going on with a foster pet through the marketing materials and not through other pathways, and more proper pathways to get that pet the support that it needs. Some tools that I think I would like to recommend if we're not using them, things like having a central email address for foster photos and foster bios to go to, using Google Docs or just a Google folder where people can easily drop things in right from their phone. Facebook groups, if your foster collective isn't using this, it's definitely one of the easiest ways to get everybody kind of in the central space where you can share information. Text, I know a couple of groups that are using text functions, and you can actually set up text through Google in a way that people can kind of easily text over photos and things like that. So many ways, but I think what is the most important thing about these options is just everybody getting on the same page. And then again, consider, if you're not already using, having a conversation about a brand hashtag or a hashtag that all fosters can use, so that it makes it easy to know and discover all the different content that may be going out there into the interwebs of social media. So now that we have that piece of the puzzle, I think the next most important thing to talk about is photos and the imagery that we use. And the reason that we'll talk about this before we talk about language and kind of captions and bios is because photos are the first thing, right? That's the first hook that we need people to grab onto. If you just think about the way that you use social media, that all of us use social media as individuals, we often get into that kind of mindless scroll, right? So we're just scrolling until something captures our attention. And rarely is it the words that capture our attention first. Typically, it's the photo. And that means that we have some heavy lifting to do with our foster photos sometimes, in making sure that we are kind of getting the best of that content out there. And this is where I will say, quality over quantity is sometimes the way to think about this for social media. One amazing photo is better than a bunch of photos where you can't totally see the animal, or it's a little bit dark, or their coloring looks wrong. We want to kind of nail that one great photo. And this doesn't need to be a high pressure situation. All of us can create a really amazing photo using just our cell phones. And you don't have to have the newest cell phone. You don't have to have the fanciest, most up-to-date version with 6 lenses or whatever we're on now. You can use your good old iPhone or your Android or whatever you have with one lens and still accomplish a lot of these things. So we're just going to go through kind of these top tips for those game-changing photos. And the first is really simple. It's simply getting on the level of the pet. So oftentimes we are taking photos from above animals because that's our perspective, right? We're looking down at them. And some of those photos can be really adorable, right? If you have a dog or a cat looking straight up into the lens and the light's really good. And, I'm not saying that we can't have those photos. I think they're amazing. But I'll give you an example. I have a 75-pound dog who's in this photo here, Patty. And if I take a photo from above him, he tends to be kind of a slender guy. He's a little bit older now. You can't really tell how big he is if I'm taking the photo looking down at him. But if I get on his level, and that doesn't mean that you have to lay on the floor if that's not something that you're comfortable with. Although I think those photos come out really adorably. It just means lowering, whether you're sitting on a couch or sitting on the floor, or if it's a cat or a smaller dog who can get up on the furniture so that they're elevated closer to your level. Being able to just take that photo from basically head on, right? So that we're getting a better size perspective, a better idea of what that pet actually looks like from that perspective. We want to make sure that those photos are at least included in what we're putting out there. Using natural light and avoiding harsh sun is the next kind of typical recommendation. No matter what your housing situation is, whether you're in an apartment or a home, whether you feel like you have great natural light in your house or you hate it, you feel like it's dark, there are things that we can do to use the natural light just from the sun to take really great photos. The one thing that you want to remember is if you're inside using natural light, you always want to position it so that the window is behind you as the photographer, kind of coming in over your shoulder, so that it's so that all that nice light is playing off of the animal's face, right? And this is if you're doing more of a staged photo shoot, maybe not something that is on the fly or candid. But even if let's say Patty was sleeping on this couch that's behind him in this photo here. Even if I wanted to take a candid photo of him, the direction that I'm going to position myself, because now the window is behind him. So rather than take a photo straight on at the window, I might come so that I'm parallel to him in the couch and take the photo of him that way, so that the light is kind of reaching him nicely from the side of his body, rather than from behind him, where he'll probably look like he's in witness protection, right? He'll turn into kind of a black shadowy blob because all of that bright sunlight is behind him. The other thing that you'll notice on here is to avoid harsh sunlight. And that's something that I think is counterintuitive to a lot of us if you don't have photography experience. I think a lot of us look outside, we see a beautiful sunny day like we're having here in New York today, and you're like, perfect, I'm gonna go take a little foster photo shoot, or I'm gonna take this dog for a walk and take photos outside. You actually want to seek out the shade or a nice, beautiful cloudy day if that is something that happens in your area. I know if you're in Las Vegas or Phoenix, like those cloudy days are hard to come by, but what you can still do is use things like the shadow that the building casts, or the shadow from a tent. Sometimes we have like those outdoor tents in our yard, or like the pop-up tents, just a tree. Any kind of small sliver of shade is going to give you so much more beautiful light on that pet, because believe it or not, pets squint just like us when they're in the sun, and their coloring can get totally blown out by the sun. So that bright sunlight is often just as unflattering for them as it is when someone takes a picture of us in the harsh sunlight with those big shadows on our faces. So keep that in mind in terms of light. Pay attention to background, and this is again where you can either quickly clear the scene or just change the position of your body when you're taking a photo of your foster. So if you have a cat who is hanging out, but their litter box is behind them, see if there's a way that you can shift your body just slightly so that that litter box is no longer in the photo. And it's simply because we want the pet to be the focus of the photo. We don't want anything in the background that's going to start to make somebody's eyes stray away from the actual pet. And the next tip is to shoot for eye contact. And I know this can be kind of a tough one depending on the foster pet that you're dealing with. I have two dogs who both tend to shy away from my cell phone. Like they're tired of me taking photos of them, so they tend to look away. Some simple stuff can get their attention back to the lens of the camera. And keep in mind that when you're trying to get attention on your cell phone, you want to hold whatever it is that you're getting attention with, whether it's a treat, whether you're making kind of a crinkly noise or a kissy noise to try to get their attention towards you, or a feather wand. Bring that right over top of the camera so that they're not inevitably looking up and above and kind of this like funny school photo looking off into the distance. You want them to be looking right into the lens of the camera. One thing that works really, really well, especially for my chow hounds and some of the foster dogs that I've had, is, I don't know if you guys will be able to hear this, but this is a treat bag noise, right? So just that crinkling of a treat bag right over the top of a phone. And actually, I do that sometimes with like tinfoil balls for foster cats or foster kittens. Something auditory that can get their attention sometimes works even better than pulling out a treat right away. Sometimes if cats or dogs are really, really treat motivated, they end up looking a little crazy when you use a treat to get their attention in a photo. They look a little bit too amped. So consider something, start with something small, something to just get their attention towards the camera, rather than pulling out all the big stops initially. And the final thing that I want you to think about in terms of game-changing photos, and also just consider what it is that you're drawn to when you're scrolling through social media, is not shying away from having people in the photo or a small element of connection, whether it's a hand on a head or someone petting a cat or a dog, or even having somebody's feet in the photo, you know, like on a nice walk. I think all of that is actually a really beautiful hint at the potential adopter's future with this animal, right? Those little pieces of connection can really inspire people to think about how they would feel in that position, how much they would like to connect with this animal in that same way. I know that a lot of us really shy away from being in front of the camera and getting our photos taken, and we often kind of try to lean out of those photos. I think it's important to consider what's best for the pet, and sometimes what's best for them is for you to stay in the photo and to be really connective in that moment in an effort to try to show people what it's like to be with this pet. And that's the most important part of the puzzle. So here's a couple of just really quick, very basic examples. So in the first example, the pet's not really fully in the frame. We see someone holding him right from behind. Somebody has their arms on him in the back. We're taking the photo from above him. So he's very cute. And I still would probably want to look at that photo, but I'm not really getting the same kind of impact from it as I do in the second photo. So in the second photo, someone is sitting at eye level with him. He looks like he's actually like a little bit more calm, a little bit more collected in this photo. He's laying down, and it's that person in the photo with him just petting him is a much better kind of piece of connection than someone who looks like they're trying to restrain him, right? And that person might be there for practical purposes to try to keep him still while we're taking his photo. That's totally fine. We just don't want it to look like he's being restrained, right? And also notice that the lighting is a little bit better in this second photo, that there's not any harsh sunlight. There's nothing really distracting in the background. So we've kind of checked all those boxes that we just talked about. And this is a great photo that can be used both, you know, on Pet Finder or Adopt-A-Pet, someplace where people are actively looking for pets, I already know that they want to adopt, as well as social media, where you have more of a chance of hitting people who maybe weren't considering adopting today, but they fell in love with this face. Here's a couple other great examples. So in both cases, we have someone in the photo with the orange cat, someone who lowered themselves to that cat's level to take that photo. And in the kitten photo, someone who waited for this cat to be elevated at their level, right, on a cat tree. So again, there's a lot of different ways to kind of work with this. And in each of these photos, you can tell by that little catch light, that little gleam in their eyes, kind of the direction that the light is coming in. For the orange cat, it's coming in from kind of the right side of his body. And that's really pleasing light. It doesn't matter so much that the right side of him is a little bit brighter than the left side of his body, because he's basically just awash in some beautiful natural light. Nothing is too shadowy, nothing is distracting about this. Like, most of what we're focusing on in this photo is just his beautiful face. And I like his little neat paws in the front. In the kitten photo, same thing, the light we can see is actually coming in maybe more from the left side, but from behind the photographer, right? So if you're in the position of taking this cat's photo, you can imagine that the light, whether it's from a big window or a small window, we can see that it's coming in from behind. And again, what that does is just light up the front of their body so that they're not in shadow. These are some other ones that I really adore, and I think are great examples of just, you know, candid moments and using what we have, because it's not always going to be the perfect setup, and we don't all live in beautifully well lit homes. But I love this picture of this dog. He's very close, right, to the camera, but I think it actually makes it even more endearing. Like, we get a little bit of that bobblehead effect because just his head is in focus. his body is more out of focus. And this is a great example of just using, if you have portrait mode on your phone or anything like that, a pro mode on it, I think it's called Pro on Android, being able to get that naturally blurry background so that, I mean, if we're really gonna zero in on what's in the background, we can see it's like a hallway and maybe some coats hanging up in the back, but that's not what we focus on when we originally see this photo, right? We're zeroed in right to his eyes, right to his little speckly nose, and we get to focus on that adorable face, right? And not really get distracted by much else. And the example of the cat, there's a couple of things happening here. We're using portrait mode, and you can tell that we've kind of tapped on the phone to focus on the cat's face, because his paw, his outstretched paw, is blurry. That's totally fine, right? Because it's about connecting with his eyes and with his face. The light is coming in from not behind, but directly on the side of him. But because it's a beautifully kind of big window for the size of his body, it's great light. So again, as long as the light isn't directly behind the cat, this is still a perfect scenario. And in the bottom photo of him, he's, you know, relaxed and sleeping. And rather than try to like get him up, try to stage a photo shoot at that point, the best way that we're going to get him kind of in his natural state is to just at that point rest the phone on the chair so it's perfectly eye level. That way you also know you're not getting any kind of shaking from your hands and your body just naturally moving. And everything in the photo is nice and crisply in focus, right? Nothing is blurred from movement. And we're just getting a nice kind of picture of him in his natural state, relaxing. So video is another way that we can show even more about our foster pets. And there's actually a study that I'll include in kind of the follow-up documents to this that came out a couple years ago that indicates that adopters actually may connect with video even more than photos. And I think that that makes a lot of sense intuitively, right? If we feel like we can see a pet in action, we almost start to feel like we know a little bit more about them, right? So even if it's a small, simple moment, and whether that is, you know, a cat playing with a toy or just some of my favorite social media videos are cats or kittens just doing like their big deep purrs, right? If you can capture that on video, it's super relaxing, and who doesn't need a little bit more relaxation in their social media feed these days? But it's also really just connects with that moment of like what everyone loves about spending time with a cat, right? Just those quiet moments of having a purring cat beside you is really emotionally connective. So same things kind of apply as when we're talking about taking good photos with our cell phone, but it's even more important with video to stabilize your phone. So rather than, a lot of the time we have a habit of having our phone straight out in front of us, and so our arms are kind of straightened when we're doing that. What we want to do instead is kind of lock our elbows into our sides so that our body is actually stabilizing our arms, and then hold your cell phone that way. It used to be a good rule of thumb to take video horizontally, right? So to move your phone so that it's kind of long ended. But most of the platforms, most of the social media platforms at this point support vertical video. And so because most people are using social media on their phones and not necessarily on a desktop, most people are definitely interacting with Instagram on their phones, of course, but also Facebook is mostly accessed through the phone app. TikTok, of course, through the phone, any of that kind of stuff that you may be engaging in. So the rule of thumb, if you've heard that in the past, has kind of changed. And instead you want to take vertical videos because it allows you to use those video clips in a multitude of ways, right? That won't get cut off. So not only can you use them in Facebook and Instagram feeds, but they'll be really, really, really useful if you're doing things like Instagram or Facebook stories and some of those other ways that we can engage people. You want to keep it simple. No, gone are the days of like even 1-minute videos are a little bit long for people at this point, and that's definitely kind of the max. 2 and 3-minute videos, you can pretty much guarantee that people are not going to stick around for the whole video. So if you do end up making a longer video, you want to make sure that you give key information kind of at the beginning of the video. So you want to say who the dog is, where they're available, who the cat is, where they're available, and include that information in the text of the post, so the caption that you're writing. Because if someone doesn't make it all the way through the video and that's where you had that really important key information, they're never going to get it, right? They're never going to know where to find that pet. Keep it short, sweet, very engaging, and don't be afraid of kind of funny content or things that are just like moments that make you smile about your foster pet. I'm gonna show you guys this video if it will play. And if you have a dog near you, there is some squeaky toy action that's about to happen. So you can either mute or turn down your volume a little bit. I don't wanna make anybody's pets crazy, but we'll see if this works. So this was, sorry, I had to advance the slider. It just keeps going on a loop after that. And I think we've all heard enough of that. So that was the dog that they actually had named after, I can't remember his exact name. He was from KC Pet Project in Kansas City. And he had a name after a musician. So they kind of noticed that like he loved to sing along with his squeaky ball and really took advantage of that. And it was a huge hit for that dog, just that small moment of him singing along with his squeaky ball and doing some howling. And it's just an average pet quality moment, right? But we have to remember that most adopters aren't necessarily looking for some big feature film about how they know how to sit and lay down and do any kind of special tricks. Like most people just want to know, what is my future going to look like with this pet? What would, if I had this pet in my home, what's a small moment that I could kind of imagine myself in? And those are the kinds of things that we do with our own individual pets, right? We play with them. We notice that they have quirky behaviors and that they howl along with their squeaky ball, all of those kinds of things. So just keep that kind of stuff in mind. It doesn't need to be anything fancy. It just needs to be something that feels connective and feels like someone could walk away knowing a little bit more about that pet. So now I want to talk to you guys about, in terms of content, just kind of the pet descriptions that we're writing, the bios, and how we can engage people on social media. The most important things, I think, are keeping it simple, especially for social media. So the bios that you would write for pet adoption software or for Pet Finder or Adopt a Pet profiles, those might be a little bit longer, though I would really encourage you not to make them too long because people just don't read lots of paragraphs these days, unfortunately. But especially on social media, you just want to give a little bit of information, enough to make people successful in their search or in their interest for a pet, right? So we want to share day in the life kind of things. We want to share graphics that'll grab people's attention. So in this example, this kind of interview with Ozzy, all of the information is on the photo, and then we can write a super simple caption on the actual social media platform, and everything's kind of self-contained in this photo. So we know where to find him because the organization's logo is on there. We get some really adorable information about him. If he was a food, he'd be a Twinkie. Favorite place he's visited is a lap, car ride, or long walk. Chauffeur, please. So we're getting a little hint at his personality, right? He's maybe a little bit lazy. Beach or mountains, either. If it's on TV, now we know for sure he's a little bit lazy, right? And favorite day of the year, any day I'm with you, right? So that we have this beautiful moment of connection with him at that point. The other things that I want you to just kind of highlight in your brain about bios and sharing information about your pet is that it doesn't replace adoption counseling. So I think that sometimes, and it's absolutely in our efforts to be responsible and respectful and all of those things, we end up putting everything that we would say in a conversation about a pet into our social media posts. And we want to remember that the act of marketing and this kind of act of not just influencing behavior around this individual pet, but just the welcoming kind of feelings we want to create around pet adoption, it's just about getting someone interested. And if they're serious about taking action, they're going to learn more about Ozzy. They're going to take the next step and read his bio on Pet Finder or Adopt a Pet, or they're going to take the next step and contact the organization or go visit him, under normal circumstances in a non-pandemic year. So I want you to just consider we need to share critical information. So if Ozzy doesn't like to be around other pets, then we need to share that in a way in this bio, right? And it could be just as simple as I'm not interested in sharing my space with other pets because, let's be honest, I'm too amazing to share the attention, or something that is light and doesn't go deep into an adoption counseling session on why he needs to be the only pet, but it's setting expectations, it's letting people know what is what about him. But we're saving those counseling conversations about behavior, about medical issues, things like that, for the actual act of adoption, if that makes sense. So here's a really great kind of I love this bio, this quote on social media from a foster, because there's a couple of amazing things that happen here. They give you a nice glimpse of what it's like to be with this pet. They give you a way to imagine the future as the reader of this bio, and they also really write from the heart in terms of when they decided to foster, they had no idea that they'd be given such an instantly lovable dog. Like, that's such a beautiful sentence, right? And I won't read this all to you because we're short on time. But they really explain all the things that are amazing about him. He's a big dog. He looks a little chubby in this photo, but we'll let him have that. He looks very happy. He doesn't bark. He's a wonderful apartment dog. He's relaxed. He takes his own space when needed. So that's all really amazing stuff to know as a potential next owner of this dog. So keep in mind that sometimes the information is really just almost a testimonial of your time with them as a foster. And I love that they end all of this with, he'll look at you with his big puppy eyes and you'll absolutely melt. I can say with all sincerity that adopting Socks will not just improve his life, but yours as well. And really, at the end of the day, that sentence for me encapsulates why fostering is so important, right? And why pet adoption is so important, because it really is, it's not just about helping animals and how much we love animals. It's also about how much animals give to us, right? And what we get out of that relationship. And I think that's a pretty universal concept to tap into on social media, especially in this current climate where people really need some of that good stuff to hold on to. So there's tons of resources at the end of this presentation, some links, and we'll include those when we send out a copy of these slides and the recording to all of you. But I'm a big fan of fill in the blanks, especially for difficult things that you're not really sure how to talk about, the fact that you don't know anything about this dog's past or this cat's past, because people ask about those things, right? And it puts you in an uncomfortable position sometimes to be like, well, I don't know what their past life was like. And in those situations, often we turn to guessing, right? So we say, well, he's afraid of the broom when I sweep, so I think that he was abused, right? That's a big leap, and it's not doing anybody any favors to make those kinds of guesses, right? It's pretty much a dog or a cat behavior to not want somebody to sweep a broom in your direction. And we don't want to make these big leaps to every single pet up for adoption comes from a sketchy background, because what does that say about pet adoption in general, right? And I think these are the bigger picture questions we want to be asking about ourselves when we're trying to market not just a pet, but the entire kind of pet adoption way of life, right? We want to break this narrative that every shelter or rescue pet came from difficult circumstances. Not only is it not true, it also really takes away from the animals who really have had a difficult time and those conversations that we need to have about those pets. So really, whatever you do, stop yourself from guessing in those situations. And we have a lot more bio writing information on our website if you are interested in that. But I want to move on to just general engagement and creative ideas, because I think, in my opinion, the best of creativity comes from sharing and inspiration from what other organizations are doing, what's working for other people. So the first is, especially if you are running an account as a rescue or a shelter, considering foster Instagram takeovers and the stories. And you can cross-post these to Facebook stories. That works really well. But I would say you want these to live on Instagram. This is really kind of the home of Instagram takeovers. So here's just an example of November is Adopt a Senior Pet Month. This is from Muddy Paws Rescue in New York City. And they were kind enough to share this example with us for a presentation we did for Petco Foundation. And it's really just like they collected some great photos from some of their fosters and were able to highlight, 10-year-old benevolent ruler, blind and mostly deaf, oversees her kingdom with love. We go on to Hi, I'm Spud. Getting to know me is one of my favorite things. And then we move on to, I also enjoy homes with laps to sit in. And like Spud is my kind of guy, right? I'm already getting that feeling from just these simple Instagram story posts. So these are, again, these are small examples. You can take this idea and run with it in whatever way, your creative juices take you. It's okay to be funny. And I think this is something that we really have to embrace, especially about the current moment and social media. So there's so much heavy stuff out there right now, guys, right? Like there's a lot of stuff flying at us in social media. And a lot of us are taking a break from social media right now because it's a little bit too much. But consider how many brands, like even if you watch the Super Bowl, if you watch everyday commercials, consider how many brands are using pets in their marketing that have nothing to do with pets, right? So it's car commercials that include pets, chip commercials that include pets. Everything and anything is marketed by using pets because it is something we can all agree on. There's this universal love for pets. Pets bring some levity and some lightheartedness to marketing. And we have the amazing benefit of having all of that built into our missions, right? It's all about pets. So don't be afraid to just take simple moments, have a funny caption, or something that is going to make people smile, right? So Corn Dog has a case of the Mondays, like that's very relatable, very relatable content. And then we just have sweet, simple moments, like Barbara Jean is finding time to enjoy the little things in life, like sunshine and spring flowers. And again, it doesn't have to be earth shattering. It can just be something as simple as these little moments. I think what is sometimes undervalued by all of us is just highlighting daily life, right? And again, you'll see in all these pictures, like they don't all have to be supermodel shots. They're all effective in their own way, right? And there are things that we might improve about all of them, but for the most part, they're getting the job done, right? Especially at the beginning of quarantine or current kind of shelter in place orders, depending on where you are in the country. Highlighting that kind of daily life, what you're up to, how you guys are getting through it together, how your foster pet is making your life better and more enjoyable through this year. Simple stuff, just watching TV, laying on the couch, playing Uno, other quarantine activities, all of that is actually social media gold at this moment in time. Sharing the whole family fostering. And this is obviously a very personal decision. I know some people do not like to have their children on social media, and I absolutely respect that decision. If that's something that you are already comfortable with and you don't mind including your family, your kids, any other pets in photos with your foster, this is also where potential adopters get a lot of valuable information, right? So we don't even have to take up words in our limited captions by saying, so-and-so loves hanging out with my kids, because it's right there in the photo, right? So they're already getting some really incredible information. I will tell you that these photos also kind of pull double duty and are really valuable in getting other families to consider fostering, right? So if someone has been kind of on the fence, they want to help out, but they're not sure if they should bring foster pets into the home with their kids. Some people have reservations about that. This is the way to kind of subtly push back against those myths and show them like, no, this can absolutely be done. And our family really enjoys it. It's really valuable for our children. It's really important. Show their transformation. And the one thing that I want to say about this before we get too far into it is what is really important about showing a transformation, especially if we have Thor in the shelter and then Thor in a foster home, is to work with the shelter or consider the shelter's role in all of this. So if you're with a rescue organization or even you're with the shelter, it's our jobs to help lift up the shelter, right? The shelter is typically doing really difficult work with limited resources. And no matter how big and beautiful we build our shelters, we all know that it is still a stressful place for animals. but we have to be really careful about the way that we send that message to the community, right? So we don't want to do anything that puts down the work of the shelter. So in this scenario, if you're writing a caption, you could absolutely show how Thor is thriving in a foster home while giving credit to the shelter for doing everything that they could for him. He just wasn't comfortable, right? So we don't ever want to hurt that relationship that we want to be having with shelters. We don't want to demean the work that's happening there or the people that are doing it. So this is something I feel really strongly about. If anybody wants to talk about that further, absolutely reach out to me. It's one of my favorite things to talk about. But it's really important for us to consider that not everybody in the community understands sheltering. And often they have kind of a mythologized view of it, right? This idea of the dog pound or dog catchers. And it's our role as animal advocates and animal lovers in the community to really take that idea and push back against it and say, no, the shelter actually does wonderful work. This cat just wasn't thriving in the environment. So this is what makes him a perfect foster home candidate. Also consider creating hashtags for your specific foster. So this is different than hashtags for the overall brand, right? So if your rescue or your shelter has a hashtag, you want to be using that. But in this case, this little pom-pom dog had a broken leg and my friend Tori was fostering him and she started just calling him broken pom-pom. And so every time she posted about him, she used that hashtag. And before you know it, that's a hashtag that she can now call up and every single post about him shows up that way. And it just is a discovery mechanism, if you're not as familiar with hashtags, for people to learn more, get a little bit more information, to click on and find a lot more posts. So they're important, especially on platforms like Instagram and Twitter. It also inspires you to post more often using that hashtag. So it may become kind of something that makes it easier for you to think about your creative posts and how they might fit into that hashtag that you've developed for your pet. You can also create social media accounts for fosters. I would ask you to think really hard before you develop a new Instagram or Facebook account for every single foster. It typically works much better if you just have one central foster account. So in this example, Adoptable Dogs of New York City, this is actually a member of our artist program. She is a professional photographer and she fosters a ton of dogs. And rather than have, a different account for every single dog, like you see Zeppeli and Jones and Chumper in her highlight reel, she has one account where you pretty much know if you're following her, you're always going to see her newest foster dog. The reason for that is you don't want to have to start from scratch every time that you get a new foster. You don't want to have to build a new following, get more people to follow you. Otherwise, you're just kind of putting content out there into the wind. But she has an established following of almost 10,000 followers. So that is that many more people that are going to be exposed to every single foster pet that she brings into her home. So the last thing that I just want to say is, again, no matter what role you're in, I think it's really important not to hesitate to reach out, especially if you want to learn more about how the organization you're working with is using social media. Every organization has a different strategy around social media. Every organization has a different way of organizing content and handling who posts when and where and all of that kind of stuff. And the best way for you to know how to get more of your foster pet seen across those platforms, and the best way to know how you can be helpful is really just to ask. And vice versa, if you're managing this for an organization, the best way to develop practices that your fosters are going to take part in is to really go to them and say, how would this work if we tried it this way? Or what do you think would be the easiest way to get us content, so on and so forth. So here's a bunch of the resources. And again, these are all live links that you'll get when you get the presentation slides. We have a number of resources on the HeARTs site, everything from more bio writing stuff to more about foster photography, but also lots and lots of social media tools. So suggested hashtags, a little bit of a deeper dive into each one of the social media platforms that we tend to talk about. And then I also just did want to give a plug if you're interested in doing kind of a slower walkthrough to learn about social media. We created a course with Maddie's University and their foster program on social media that you'll see a link to there. And that's kind of just a learn at your own pace course that you can go through. It's very easy, very quick. We're not talking about a weeks long course. It would take you less than an hour, but at least you can go through at your own pace and do a deeper dive on some of these things. So that is my contact information. I would love for any of you guys to, feel free to reach out if I could ever be of help, if you have any specific questions. I wanted to kind of fly through that so that we had at least 5 minutes for questions. And I know Katie's been keeping track of the chat and kind of the Q&A box. So we can start there if there's anything that popped up during the presentation.
We do have a question to get started with. Someone asked, how do we pick the right brand hashtag? Do you have any tips for kind of picking one to stick with for your brand?
Yeah, I think sometimes it's deceptively simple. So sometimes it really should just be the name of the organization. In those cases, if we're talking about for the entire organization, I would stay away from abbreviating things. So in this example, like Muddy Paws Rescue NYC, rather than doing like hashtag MPR NYC, they are just Muddy Paws Rescue or Muddy Paws NYC, I think is their brand hashtag. So you want it to be pretty easily recognizable. And the other reason I would stay away from acronyms is you never know who else is using them. So before you start to use a hashtag that you want to take on as your brand, do a quick search of it. Even if you feel like, well, it's just our rescue or our shelter name, do a search of that hashtag. Make sure it's not being used by anybody else, and especially organizations that you wouldn't want to be associated with. I'll give you a good example. An organization that I'm working with has the acronym HASS. So they were using just that hashtag, HeARTs. Turns out that HeARTs in German means hate. And so that is not a hashtag that we would want associated with animals, right? So they had to turn it into the HeARTs life or other hashtags that use that acronym without it just being that simple hashtag, because that would be very much off brand, if that makes sense.
It does. I think that makes a lot of sense. You kind of want to do some research on the hashtags before you pick one to stick with, for sure.
Absolutely.
I know another question I had, we talked a little bit about platforms and how many there are these days. And you had mentioned kind of sticking with where your audience is and not trying to go out of your comfort zone too much. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. So what I typically recommend to shelters and rescues in general, and this goes for individual fosters as well, is if you're often using Facebook, or Facebook is where you know for sure you have a good following, people are really sticking with you there, I'm not going to then tell you like go straight from Facebook to a TikTok account, right? So you want to continue to manage your Facebook account. And if you feel like you're doing that really well and nobody's overextended, then I would encourage you to try an Instagram account. Instagram works really, really well if some of you aren't on Instagram, both as individuals and as organizations. It works really, really well for pet adoption and pet fostering because it's so visual, because there are so many opportunities to get your information to travel a little bit farther, where we're seeing a decline in reach on Facebook and sometimes Instagram, at least through hashtag discovery and through tagging and stories. Like there's a lot of different pathways to connect with people through Instagram. So that's usually the path that I recommend for shelters and rescues, is start with Facebook, do it really well, move on to Instagram. And if you have someone in the organization who's really comfortable with Twitter, who's really functional at Twitter, so that you're not just setting up automatic posts to Twitter, Twitter would be another one that I would really use. I think there's a lot of potential adopters there, and lots of us don't use it effectively for animal welfare. So there's a big audience to choose from and get involved. And then with things like TikTok, like I think there's tons of room to explore with that. And I use TikTok just for video creation, and then I share it across to other platforms. So I'll share TikTok videos in our Instagram stories just because it's an easy way to make videos. But know your audience. So on TikTok, the audience is typically a lot younger. So just know that it's fine to get a huge following on TikTok, but if none of those people are ultimately going to take action and adopt a pet, whatever audience you build on whatever platform, you want them to be individuals in your community, your local community, who are ultimately going to take action.
Great. I had another question from one of our attendees. When you are starting a new account, how do you first get followers when you're brand new? Like if you're just joining Instagram, how do you get started?
Yeah, so a good rule of thumb on Instagram is to start following more people to get followers. So there is that kind of follow back action that happens on Instagram. The other best way to do that is using hashtags, and it's why hashtags are so valuable on Instagram. So what I always recommend to people is use a couple of big hashtags, big national, like millions of follower hashtags, like adopt a pet, adopt a dog, dogs of Instagram, cats of Instagram. All of those are huge followings. And that may get you a couple new followers. But what's even more valuable on Instagram and on Twitter as well is using local hashtags. So if you, like we have, I love New York is obviously a big hashtag for the state, but in the Hudson Valley where I live, there's a couple Hudson Valley specific hashtags. So for my local organization here, we want to use those local Hudson Valley hashtags. We want to use, whatever our tourism boards hashtags are. And you can find all of those just by starting to follow some of those accounts. So follow other local businesses, follow, your tourism board and things like that, local parks, any of that kind of stuff will give you a feel for what the local hashtags are. And that's how you're ultimately going to build a following of not just people who like your photos, but people who can potentially become adopters and supporters of your organization. I hope that makes sense.
It does. Yeah, definitely. Another question we got, how do you get a rescue group to share your posts and your fosters? So if you're a foster yourself, how do you kind of make sure your rescue is sharing?
And that's where I really recommend just having that conversation with your rescue group, like reaching out to whoever your contact is. They can always put you in touch with the person who's in charge of this stuff. But my question to them would be, I'm creating a lot of content and I'm posting it on my individual account. How can I more easily get that to you? Or are there hashtags or ways of tagging you that would be the easiest way for you to reshare this information? So let's say you're using Instagram or Facebook. When you're writing a post about your pet, you always want to make sure that you're tagging. So with the @ symbol, that organization, find out what their handle is on Facebook or Instagram. And even if you just put it at the end of the post, make sure that they're tagged in that post or on the photo, because you can also tag in photos. And that way they at least have the option. It's at least coming through their feed. They're getting a notification that they got tagged. And then you know for sure that they at least have the option to reshare that. A lot of what I see, and I've had this conversation with some of our artists, and our artist network is, we had a couple of people who were posting beautiful professional photos, but they were just naming the organization. And a few of them were just saying Humane Society, blah, 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 blah about this animal. Well, if I'm looking at your account and I'm not local to you, I have no idea what Humane Society you're talking about, right? Or even if I am local to you, a lot of people in our communities don't know about our local SPCA, our local shelter, our local Humane Society. So what you want to make sure is that you're tagging that exact organization so that both the follower can investigate that pet, and so that the individual organization can reshare your information and be notified that you're sharing it.
Great. I had another question too regarding kind of looking for photography help, because I think you guys have kind of a resource for this, like with the artists helping animals.
Yes.
If a rescue is looking for help with getting better photographs, what's the best way to approach a photographer or find one?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the first thing that I would recommend is we have a map on our website called Find an Artist Map. So you can just use I would use your state, because if you search like your city, it may be a little too specific. But if you search your state on that map, you can see if we have any artists who are already in our network who are nearby to you. And then all their contact information is on that map. You just reach right out to them. Or you could reach out to us and we could connect you. That's one existing resource. The other thing is to, as you're building your accounts or as you're going about, managing social media, start to follow local photographers, get a feel for pet photographers in your area, do a Google search for pet photographers in your area, and you'll find that a lot of them do some form of charitable work. And if they haven't, reaching out to them and just kind of explaining, we're looking for someone who can really help get more eyes on our adoptable pets. Is this something that you would be interested in? And then I think the most important part of all of this is being ready to have an open conversation, right? So most artists have a limited amount of time that they can give. Most of them would like you to tag them at least, or give a little bit of credit in the photos that they're taking. And I don't think that that's too much to ask. I think we want to have kind of this two-way street of, they're going to end up cross promoting your pets. I don't think it's so bad for them to have a small logo on the photo, or to be able to get a little shout out, in exchange for that service that they're providing. But make sure that you're having that kind of open and honest conversation right from the beginning to say, we would love for you to volunteer to do this. What are your stipulations in terms of, what would you ask us to do in return? And have a conversation at that point. If you're not comfortable with a large logo on the photo, talk it through, right? Say, we find that that's sometimes a little distracting. What could we do instead? Is there a way for you to have a smaller watermark, or is there a way for us to tag you in lieu of that watermark and make sure that we're still giving proper credit? So really just having that respect for that exchange of services and someone's professional livelihood. But you'll find that so many artists are really excited to be able to do this work.
That's great. That's been my experience as well. I think just, even if you find an up and coming photographer who might be more interested in doing a little bit of work for exposure, that's always a good place to start, or start if your local university has a photography program, or you can find a student who might be interested in building their portfolio. Those are good places to start too.
Yeah, absolutely. I love those tips.
Well, I know we've gone a little bit over. I don't have any more questions from our attendees. So thank you, Caitlin, so much. This has been really informative. I was definitely taking a lot of notes on this. So always looking for photography tips, especially. But if anyone, this is Caitlin's email address she has up on the slide. If you have any follow-up questions, and like she mentioned, in the next couple of days, I'll be sending all of the materials to you. So you'll get these slides, you'll get a recording of this event. And some other links that are helpful resources. I put the HeARTs link in the chat you can find. So I know they have some resources on their website available for you too. But feel free to reach out if you guys have any more questions. All right, thank you. And thank you, Caitlin.
Thank you. This is great.
Everyone have a good weekend.
Thanks, Katie. Do you want me to hang out at all, or?
I'm good. I'm going to wrap up. I'll end it for everyone. I think that wrapped up our questions. So thank you so much.
All right. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.